the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African American owned broadcasting studio. WeBelieveDigital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. On We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi in the We Believe Digital Broadcasting Studio. We Believe Digital Network. You know, We Believe Digital is a little bit different than most venues. See, we're not just a page on YouTube or Facebook. We actually have our own network. You go to WeBelieveDigital.com and you'll see 8 to 10 categories of stories and films and documentaries and sports that you can choose to watch at any time you desire. At your leisure, no longer are people required to get the news at 6 and 10 p.m. Young people today are getting the news whenever they want the news. The news is coming to their phone, whether they want it or not. We're in the age of digital technology. And We Believe Digital, we're on the cutting edge. As a matter of fact, we're leading in the African American community in the state of Mississippi in this area. Now, many of you might be saying leading in Mississippi is like coming in second in a two-man race. You still last. But we're doing all we can do to make a difference, to improve the quality of life for our people, to educate our people, with shows that are designed to teach and inform and then give strategy and solutions on how we improve our conditions. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, then we want you to share the program with your friends and family and send us some stars. We need revenue. You know, like my pastors on Sunday, we need you to give according to the way you have been blessed. We need your support. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, then we want you to go on and subscribe to this program. We're in a subscription drive now. We'd like to get our subscribers up over 1,000 sometime this month. So we can't do that without your help. So go to our YouTube page at We Believe Digital Podcast and subscribe. Now, if you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, then we want you to share this program, but hit the donate button. The funds will be used to bring you articulate conversations about what's really going on throughout this country and in Mississippi in particular. Now, we do more than any other station when it comes to telling what the real news is to what's going on in our community. And tonight is no different. You know, my host and co-host, Dr. Eldred Henderson, is with us tonight, and we're going to go back and deal with the issues of how we got to where we are so that we can devise a strategy to move forward. You see, you cannot solve a problem before you identify what the problem is. You cannot come up with a solution if you don't understand the problem. You cannot move forward if you don't know where you came from. It's just impossible. And that's why you have slogans that are people of other ethnic groups that realize this, and they come up with slogans like, never again, never again, we will never forget. Those slogans are designed to make sure that future generations understand the plight, the sacrifice on how we got here. Here in the African American community, we got a disconnect from our past. We don't really understand who we are as a people and what's required of us as a people. Now, too often I look back at the generation after me and I say, they are not getting it. They are not taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of them. They are not moving the ball down the field. They're not going to be able to score. And so I'm concerned about this generation. I'm concerned that if we are in fact absent of the great leaders that were produced in my generation and the generations before that, I'm concerned that we no longer have Ralph Brown and Malcolm and Martin and Angela Davis and Stokely Carmichael and Fannie Lou Hamer and Medgar and Charles and Vernon Damer. I'm concerned we don't have C.O. Chin and W.E. Garrett up in Madison County. I'm concerned that we're not producing the kind of warriors that's required to sustain, maintain, and then win. In the business community, I see so much deterioration. I recall not long ago, in the last 20 years ago, African-American businesses in Mississippi were on the move. We had folk like B.T. Jones running Minac Corporation. I remember when he was the treasurer at the Job Corps Center in Crystal Springs, and he launched a business called Minac, Minorities in Action. That business was doing $80 million a year. We lost BT not long ago. And one of his proudest moments, as I can recall, I invited him to be the guest speaker over at the Save Our Black Dollars event, which was held right in the hood. And he said, I would love to come back in the community and speak and give back. That recognition was important to him. We lost Cornelius Turner, a man that was so poor that his daddy had to give him hand-down shoes down there in Edwards and Learned, Mississippi. That he didn't have anything as a boy. And he would ask his daddy, he said, Daddy, why do you take these hand-me-downs from this white man? And he said to Cornelius, he said, because there will become a day that you won't have to. And he built a fantastic, phenomenal business in Natchez, Mississippi, Port Gibson, Mississippi, Forest Avenue Apartments right here in Jackson, Mississippi, a 6-story high-rise downtown Jackson, the only African-American owned business of that nature. He did that. Just on this last Wednesday, we buried a good friend of mine, Jerry Owens, one of the best businessmen that the state has ever seen. Created Consolidated Foods, where they were serving some 26,000 students through Head Start. And understand this, you have to have a customer. So back at that day, Head Start was a customer, and Jerry Owens and Consolidated Foods was a vendor, a business. They supplied food to Head Start agencies, some $26,000 a day, created the business on the boulevard right there, Bailey Avenue extension. He had Classy Rags there, a clothing store. He had a hair salon station there. He had a car dealership there. And in the back, he had Consolidated Foods. The brother was absolutely on the move. And so we lost him last week. We lost Jerry Mitchell, Soups, the guy that had 3 nightclubs in Jackson, Mississippi. Down on in Mill Street, I used to go down to watch him play 5 or 6 instruments, and then he taught at Callaway High School and had the band out there. You see him on the field teaching and instructing, and in the evenings he was running his own enterprises. He made a difference. We lost him. And I could just go on and on and on and on about the folk that we lost that had traction, that were making a difference. Bank Finley and White, for example. Mac Finley, strong businessman. I can go on and on and on. Charles Cockrell, who had the Metro Waste, was running garbage trucks in Jackson, Mississippi 20 years ago, under black leadership, when we knew that minority participation was important. We've lost so much ground. I can't find businesses of the caliber that came along at my time. I just can't find them. And I can't find politicians or elected officials that are committed to black business development. I can't find anybody out here that says that I'm unapologetically black. I'm unapologetically black. I can't find anybody saying that we got to be intentional about what we do. We got to be intentional about what we do, and then we can make a difference. I can't find the elected officials that are saying my role model was Maynard Jackson in Atlanta and Harold Washington in Chicago, and I'm going to emulate them in every way possible. I don't find that. So I'm a little bit distraught. The disconnect, the chain has been broken. At the funeral, when we sing the songs, will the circle be unbroken? And when you realize and you lose a family member in your close circle, you realize that that circle has been broken. In the African American community, the circle has been broken. Now, how did we get here? Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
It's always good to have you in the studio.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I want to know, where did we come from?
Well,
and how did we get here?
Well, it's very simple. Every major professional document you can read will tell you that black people came from the continent of Africa. They have had many discoveries thousands of years ago that will show that blacks came from Africa originally and moved throughout the world. And I say throughout the world, to all the other continents in the world, and they didn't do it on an airplane, walking, riding ships and boats, and many times due to natural causes. They just had to immigrate and get to a better land, a better country. And during that time, you had black people making a lot of progress economically, politically, socially. They only had themselves to worry about. And of course, they were not 100% friendly with each other because of those problems I mentioned. They had to fight for survival, because when natural disaster would hit one part of the African continent, those people would have to move to another area, walking in most cases. So they would entrench upon the other area of their neighbors, and then, of course, they wanted to protect their homes, their communities. There would be some fighting and sometimes slavery. But by and large, the black people decided that we just have to make progress, and many of them moved to other lands because they were forced to do so by human means, humankind. And this is when our so-called legal organized slavery started by the Europeans. Now, I'm not mentioning the slave period during the Arab era, 4 or 5 centuries previous. I'm talking about the one that had the most impact on the people I know. I'm talking about the slavery that started around the 1500s, where they had black people shipped all over the world.
Now, Doc, let me stop you right there. let's go back to your initial point. Black people came from the continent of Africa.
Correct.
Is that the same continent where we had the Garden of Eden?
Allegedly, of course. That's
Is
right.
that then the first man then would have been created on the continent of Africa?
And the first woman. That's correct.
Now, Doc, if black people came from Africa, then it stands to reason and logic says that Adam and Eve should have been black.
It is most certainly a fact. And on top of that, they were made in the image of the present God at that time.
Now, hold it right there. So God created his prized creation of all his creations. He was most proud of his creation of a man because you say he created him in his own image.
That's what the book says.
And that man then would have had to have been black.
Had to be.
Now, Doc, what happened to the history then? How did history get so distorted
Well,
that,
that's
that
simple.
black people don't have high self-esteem and don't have legacy and don't have continuity and togetherness and pride? What happened?
It's very simple, and a lot of people don't like to admit how simple it is to brainwash and ruin one's mind, ruin one's history. And that's easy because history is determined by those that write it, that record it. It is also promoted by those same people when they disallow the people they are writing about to learn their history, to write about their history. On top of that, deny that they are not allowed to read or write at all, can't carry weapons to fight for themselves, have to be obedient to the oppressor 24 hours a day, no protection by the government, local, state, or federal, and at the same time you are considered lower than an animal on the area
Okay.
that they lived in.
All right, so let's go back for a minute. Now, you say that when somebody else wrote the history, so Africans had to have their own history.
They do have it.
It existed. But every time you have war, to the victor goes the spoils. We've always heard that term. But I don't think our people understand what that really means. It means the spoils means your history now becomes our history.
Exactly.
And so if you conquered Africa, then you gave them your history and your gods and your language and your way of thinking. Every time a war is won, that's what occurs.
Every time. Every time.
So, Africa, how many countries invaded Africa?
All the European countries that had any significance. Some today that are very, very minor politically, like Spain, Portugal, but the big ones, the French, the Portuguese, and the British were the main countries or nations that invaded Africa very gently and very easy. They moved in with a camouflage on their thoughts, in their mind. They wanted to scope the land from the borders and see if I could get a foothold here and see what's out there beyond my camp. And after they decided that it was quite a friendly attitude out there among the Africans, and they had the same policy when they came to the so-called Western world over here in what they call now the United States, they used the same tactic. And they say, well, we have a good foothold now. We're going to declare that this is our land. And they named it for the queens and the kings of their area. And on and on and on. And when you knew anything, Mr. Socrates, everything they discovered that was good, they say they invented it.
They invented it.
Of course. That's what you're supposed to do when you're in charge.
When you win, that's what you're supposed to do. Now, we got to go to a station break. You're watching Socrates Garrett live on We Believe Digital. My co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, and I will be right back after this break. Stay tuned.
Looking for the hottest content in the city of Jackson and surrounding areas? Check out WeBelieveDigital.com. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We Believe Digital Podcast is here for all your podcasting needs.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, keepers of the knowledge for people who speak the truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippiLink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're having a discussion about how Africans, how did we get to where we are, and we have to go back to understand our history and our beginning in order to craft strategies for the future. Now, the first segment we devoted to understanding where we came from, because, you know, if you understand that, then you will avoid history repeating itself. If you don't understand it, you're going to see what you currently see going on in our communities. Now, Dr. Henderson, we were talking about the invasion of Africa, and you brought up America, the United States, and I asked, why were people so docile? Why did the Indians allow 3 or 4 boats to come into their land and eventually take their country from them? Why did Africans let the Portuguese come on the continent in the beginning and ultimately enslave them? How did that happen?
Well, it's very simple. I can give you an example. When we finish this show in a few minutes and go out on the outside and we hear a lot of noise up in space, and all of a sudden, ships will come down from outer space and strange people walk out of that spaceship with animals that don't look like what we are familiar with weapons, with clothing, a different color, speaking a foreign language, as we call it. You don't think they're coming to fight you. You're coming to see them, and what is this new thing that I see? You're not thinking about self-defense. So therefore, you let them get a chance to move into your area, because they always come to the border, to the coast, and hang in that area for 40 or 50 years until they can consolidate areas, build a fort to protect themselves. And then that's when they start getting mean, because during that time they have interrogated the Indians, the Africans, and whatever's there, and they say, where is this gold that I see you wearing around your neck, or the diamonds that I see in your ears or in your nose? What about that oil or coal that we see that you are burning? You're making tools over there with fire. How is this done? And Africans and the Indians probably say, these are some good folks. And they taught them how to survive in these new lands. And when they got themselves to the point where they knew they could be self-contained and independent, they started moving out into the interior gradually. And then they started creating new Europeans and Africans by having personal relations with the natives there, male and females. And they created their new people, I call them the new people, to be the people that would go out into the mix of the new individuals that they so-called discovered, because they looked like both. They looked like those foreigners that came allegedly out of space, and they also looked like the people they were sent to talk to. They knew the European language and the African languages and dialects, and they moved into those areas in a self-defense method by saying, we are here to help you. And those Africans were invited to listen to those folks. They were sent in as advisors and counselors. We want to work with you.
Now, Doc, I remember as a boy that I would watch Tarzan and Jane. Where did that come from?
That's a European concept of domination.
So they start making movies showing Africans that Tarzan and Jane controlled all of the animals.
That's right.
They could call the elephants. When anything went wrong, they could call the elephants. Now, we've been there since the beginning of time. We can't call a single elephant. And so they made these movies, and they showed that even a white woman had power and superiority over the natives of the land.
And it did the same thing to the Native Americans. See, that's what I told you earlier. When you write the history, you write it in the way you want to write it. And you're going to go into then, sir, get in a position where you tell the other people, well, my way is the best way and your way is totally worthless because you don't know how to talk. You don't know how to read. You don't know how to do anything, and your spiritual life is polluted. Here is the way you do it, the way we do it. If you don't do it the way we do it, to make it simple, you are ugly. You are savage in your action. You are lazy. You will steal. And you are repeating all the things that you have done, but you, at the same time, you say you are right. You are white. You have more knowledge. We are the leader. We are the chosen people from God. We have a man that we call the Pope, and he is a direct representative from God, and you don't even have one of any significance because you worship the stars, the moon, the trees, the animals, the mountains. Therefore, your God is not like our God. Our God can save us, and he can save you. Get rid of your God, your customs, your language, and so forth, and we'll help you get saved on earth.
But in the beginning of the show, you said that God created man in his own image, and that man was created in Africa.
That's correct.
Boy, that's a long ways from the blue-eyed, long, silky hair photos of Jesus that are in every black person's house that I went to in my 60 years of going around. There were 3 pictures in there. There was Jesus with long, black, silky hair and blue eyes. Then they had Martin Luther King. Then they had John Kennedy.
That's correct.
Those are the 3 pictures that you saw most of the time.
And if they would have known the real history, they wouldn't have had either one of them. They shouldn't have them, even today. That
I didn't expect. Yeah. Well, if they had known the real history. Now, we know that the enemy rewrites the history every time he conquers a nation.
That's correct.
And so history has been rewritten Many times it was rewritten when they conquered Africa. They changed the history and they changed the language and they changed the gods. Then when Greece was in power, they changed the history. The Romans was in power. They changed the history. The Germans was in power. They changed the history. The U.S. is in power. We changed the history. Every time a victor occurs, you rewrite history.
Well, let me tell you what a lot of people don't know, don't want to hear, and don't understand, even when I'm telling you right now. If you look at the history of the world, almost every nation has been a supreme nation at one time or another. The first and most greatest nations in the world were in Africa. You know, Africa is a continent, not a state. They have about 55 different nations within Africa on that continent. I didn't say states, nations with their own government, the militaries and so forth. And I'm telling you now, those people were strong nations, had their own independence. So the world knows, and people don't want to hear it, that what used to be first, that turned out to be last, always happened because of human intervention. But if you look at the Bible, I forget the chapter, those that were first going to be last and vice versa. So all these African people throughout the world going to dominate the world one more time, because the Africans and the people of color throughout the world represents about 75% of the population of the world. And in the future, I don't know exactly how long it's going to be, but I could give you an estimate. In about 50 to 75 years, the Africans on the continent of Africa going to gain their independence again from the Europeans, because they are in the position right now where they are infiltrating the universities in Europe and America and other places with African scholars. And one day they're going to get that reassurance that we are important, that we can rule our own lands. And they are going to go back to Africa by the thousands. Many American so-called blacks going to go back to Africa. Blacks in India, in the Caribbean and other areas, going to go back to Africa, and many are going to be dual citizens. They are not going to leave where they are permanently, and they're going to rebuild. And one day, and you're going to see this, Africa then would have one united Africa, one African culture, one African military, one African space force, one African economic system, and they're going to be so powerful, they won't have to fight the Europeans like the Europeans fought them. The Europeans, the Americans, and other nations going to come to them as friends, raising their hand to the African presidents and kings and queens, just to try to get back in so they can do it again. But the Africans throughout history now are going to say, we read your early history. We know our history because of our traditions. It's not going to happen again. And you're going to find 500 to 1,000 years of African domination of the world.
Now,
and then they're going to fail.
Now, and maybe that's what everybody's afraid of.
They are. I would be.
I guess. But let's go back to a point, because I don't know how we get there if we lost our leaders and we don't seem to have committed leadership strong enough to carry that out. But I'll trust that you're right. But speaking about leaders, and I mentioned to you the 3 pictures that was in everybody's house, and you kind of threw me a curveball. And you said if they had known the history, neither one of them would have been hanging on the wall. And I want to get there for a moment. I don't want to dwell on it, but I want to get there for a moment. What kind of leader was Mandela? He is recognized as an African leader that fought off apartheid?
Well, he started fighting it off. It's still going on as strong as it was before he got out of prison.
I thought it ended.
It never ended because they didn't want to end it. Mandela and his boys were able to compromise and forgive those people and say, even though you were killing us for 175 years, all you have to do is just tell us your sins, recant, and you can keep the military, you can keep the justice system, and you can keep the economic system, and let us integrate with you and train us so we can take over.
Now, who is going to train you to displace them?
Man, I don't know why you read my mind. That's right. So they say, that's a good idea. We don't have to go to prison. You're not going to kick us out of the country. You're not going to take our land. We're going to integrate with you and let you be in charge. So they gave you the ability to be the president, and they used that same strategy where all the so-called money interest groups and their supporters still made all the decisions because they were doing what they've always done. They had the advisors and the counselors to the new African presidents and chiefs and so forth.
So is the rise of Obama kin to the rise of Mandela? Do you see any similarities?
Of course, of course.
Explain.
Well, the same thing. When Obama got in office as president, the country was about to fall apart economically. It was so bad until, it's not good to say it, but the Europeans messed it up, and they didn't have a quick fix because they thought this country was going, I'm not going to say it, but they thought this country was going down economically and we would be an inferior nation, similar to a third world nation. So they said, we've done everything we can. Since we know we're going to lose it, we're going to have to get somebody else to take the blame for the fall in America.
And so during this period of time, we saw the collapse of the financial system.
That's right.
The banking systems were collapsing and people were making runs on their banks. We saw the collapse of the American steel industry. The automobile industry was going bankrupt. GM, et cetera, was going bankrupt. We saw all of the staple companies about to lose their equity and their net worth in a depressed economy when Obama was elected.
And they couldn't fix it. They say, we caused it to happen, and the only way we can fix this, we will have to punish someone. So we're going to have to get somebody else, and they planned to get Obama as president. He was unknown. So
he was a junior senator or something in Chicago, a community activist or something? He started as a community organizer, and he was a mulatto. He was so-called well-spoken. He had a degree from Harvard Law School, and he was able to talk to the outsiders, the insiders, and others. And then he married a smart wife that didn't embarrass the black people nor the white folks. And he was the chosen one. Now, she was not a mulatto, though.
No, she wasn't. She was a real black woman, a strong black woman that was highly educated, highly opinionated. And she was smarter than the average person that she will deal with in politics, and they left her alone. Because she is like a lot of black women. And people don't like to admit it, but we have more educated black women in America and the world than black males. And they have that ability to interpret things, to plan. A lot of y'all don't like to hear that, but that's a fact.
We have to admit it because such a large percentage of the black male population is incarcerated.
Exactly.
Or is in some other line of work that is underground.
Exactly.
And so I get that. I get that. Now we're going to go to a station break, and we're going to come back. And I want to talk to you about how countries are invaded without a shot being fired. I saw it happen with the Choctaw Nation. There was no great war or the defeat of the Choctaw Indians. They ultimately got invaded. Doc, I see the Hispanic community in America making a quiet invasion. I see the LGBT community making a quiet invasion. I see all of these religious organizations that's coming up with new things they're worshiping, making invasions in a country. When we come back, I'd like for you to share your thoughts on how that's happening.
I'm ready, sir. I'm ready.
You're watching Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting right here from Jackson, Mississippi, at We Believe Digital Broadcasting Studio. Now, you can call us at 800-492-5186. If you're watching us on Facebook, share this program with your friends and family. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Go to YouTube at We Believe Digital Podcast. If you're watching us on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, then hit the donate button and share this program with your friends and family. We're going to come right back after this break. Stay tuned.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Are you dreaming? Becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.Dot grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
We're back. This is Socrates Garrett and my co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson. And we've been talking about some interesting things, and I think we got to continue to talk about that subject matter. We don't have to do it all tonight, but we got to do it every time we come on because it's critically important because we're lost as a people. Now, Doc, we were talking, and I was beginning to say that communities, races, countries, cities can be invaded. And I was saying that I didn't understand why Africa got invaded and didn't put up a fight and stop that. I didn't understand why the American Indians lost their country they got invaded and didn't understand what was happening. And then I brought it on that I don't really understand how the Choctaw Nation in Mississippi got invaded because there was never a great war. It was invaded. But then when I looked at it, Doc, I see that the Hispanic population is growing in America every day. Is that an invasion?
That is a silent invasion by design. The leaders in so-called Hispanic America or Latin America or Middle America, whatever you want to call it, know they don't have the firepower to invade and be successful in a fight against the United States. And the strategy they are using is one of the smartest strategies around. In most of those countries, they have what I call semi-dictators that are controlled by criminals. And they make the conditions so bad economically, politically, and socially in those Latin American countries until the people can't stay there. They're being raped and killed, kidnapped, tortured, because the politicians and the criminals are working together, both trying to get rich and are getting rich. And you're either going to have to work for one or the other if you want to stay there. But if you want to be an independent Latin Americans or whatever, or Hispanic, and I'm talking about 15 different nations in Latin America, you are going to have to choose. And if you want to be independent, if you want a democracy, you are an oddball. You got to go because you have work with the government or work with the criminals. And everybody don't want to do it. They want to have economic and educational independence. So you're forced out of your job. You can't go to school to get the education you need. All of that is controlled by the upper crust, the upper class, and the ruling elite. They are in bed with the ruling criminals throughout that area, including in the United States, because the government gives the criminals to do certain things they don't want to do.
So it's akin to the Trojan horse theory.
Exactly.
So Hispanics are moving through on the borders of Texas.
By the thousands.
By the thousands.
That's right.
And they have doubled the African American population in America already.
And it's going to be triple in about 12 years. The Hispanics are going to be so large in America. What's going to surprise a lot of people in the world is when they actually give a real count. The count going to probably be 75 million more than they think today.
Oh.
Because they're in these big communities, 30 and 40, living in 2 or 3 houses on the same street, working hard. They're not lazy people. They are taking care of their friends and families in the country where they have left, and they are figuring out ways to get them in this silent movement. And the government is working with them as necessary because they want their vote. You see, you don't have much being done about it. The Democrats are allowing those folks to come on in there. They pick them up these buses and have allow people to ship them all over America. Put them in hotels, feed them, clothe them.
And it's such a silent movement.
That's right.
You know, we see a little bit on the news about the border, and they have a big discussion, and it seems to be they're really at odds about how to deal with the border. And the Hispanics population keeps growing. My granddaughter lived in Oakland, California, little community outside of Oakland. I don't even know why that was relevant. But she could speak no English, period. I brought her down here to Jackson, Mississippi. She went to school in Jackson, Mississippi. She was failing. She was a straight-A student.
In California.
In California. But she could speak no English. And so not only when you get invaded, you pick up their language, you pick up their culture, you pick up their religion, you pick up their habits and their thoughts about others. To that extent, Doc, what is the relationship with Hispanics and Africans?
Well, the same thing. The Africans had a chance to get their slaves back if they wanted to, but they never made an effort to do so, even up to today. You never had an African nation to get in those ships and boats and whatever and go to what they call the Caribbean or the United States to look for their relatives and friends and children that were kidnapped, because it was done for an economic reason. Many of the Africans had Africans they had in slavery, and they just sold them. You get $25 for a slave that you have. You got to feed him. You just conquered that little old group over there, 200 or 300 of them. So you got them in your territory. You got to feed them. You got to give them somewhere to live. And the Europeans say, I buy them for $25 and take them away from you. I take care of them from therefore. And then they get them over here in America to Caribbean and sell them for $450, sometime up to $700 if they were a female from 14 to about 30 years of age. And that was a good deal. The Africans didn't have to worry about them, didn't have to feed them, and the Americans had them and made a profit of them.
Wow.
Big profit.
Wow.
And that's what the Hispanics are doing. They know what they are doing. They are coming into America with the Americans' arm wide open, and you have the party in power usually helping those people do that, and the one out of power is criticizing the one that's allowing it. Now, Trump had a little effort where he says, I'm going to curtail this invasion, but he didn't do nothing but say, you Hispanics got to stay around there in Mexico. So you can't come across the border, but every night those Hispanics would just sit there and look across the border.
And he had them working for him.
That's right.
And Doc, I recall that President Bush had a grandson that was of Hispanic origin.
A lot of them are.
And so the invasion is really taking place. But African Americans and Hispanics, though, I want to get back to that. And Jesse Jackson tried to do the Rainbow Coalition, which I believe consisted of Africans, Hispanics, and Asians.
Just a variety of races, that's correct.
And so he thought that it was that constituency came together, then they could make great change and strides in America.
That won't ever happen in America, sir.
Why?
Because, and Jesse Jackson was a smart guy, but some people work in denial. Anytime you get a person that has never seen anything good that black people do on radio, TV, movies, in books, or whatever, most of them don't have nothing but a limited education, so they don't know nothing that blacks can do other than sing, dance, and play baseball. I'm talking about a lot of the foreigners and see these stupid movies that the producers ship to those countries in Africa and Latin America. You don't see black intellectuals doing anything. And so they get over here. They don't want to be black, but since they are accustomed to learning how to blend in, they will work with blacks for a while. But all the Hispanics that's in America today, I'm talking about today, not even worried about black folks because most of them are white people. They are going to be declared white. When they start filling out these applications, once they learn how to read English, they're going to check white because they are white people. The only few that couldn't do that are going to be those dark Hispanics. And they're going to be multicolored, other races.
Why would they want to check white? Why don't they want to be proud and check Hispanic?
Well, they know they're going to be discriminated against because the Hispanics, and I've talked to some in private, they are going to take over America.
Oh.
They are going to be the sheriffs, the mayors, the vice presidents, the governors. And then black people then, Mr. Sack, this grandchild of yours, you better tell her she better keep that Spanish and learn as much English as possible, because when Hispanics get in charge of these governments, these big countries, big companies throughout America and the world, I've been saying it for 30 years, they're going to do something that they used to have in America when blacks couldn't qualify for anything. They're going to have a rule that you must be bilingual to get this job in government, in this school system. Be the program manager, you must have bilingual abilities. They're not going to discriminate against anybody. They just say you're not qualified. Education won't be the problem. It'll be you can't speak the language because they're going to be everywhere.
I just want to remind our viewers out there how serious this is. The World Series last year was played between two great teams, the Astros and somebody else. Not a single African-American player was on either team. Not a single African-American player was on either team. There's something going on out here in America that we better wake up. We better see what's coming and see what we're up against and try to form some unity in our community. Now, Dr. Henderson, we're running short on time.
But let me explain why that has happened.
Go ahead.
Because of the love of integration. The black middle class have given away their lives and their generational aspirations because of integration. They lost their baseball teams, softball teams. They used to have them when I was a boy. Every black community had a baseball team. It was, of course, unorganized. They didn't have them in the schools, very few schools. Even today, you don't have many black high schools with baseball teams. So the only blacks you're going to see on the baseball team in the next 15 years will be those so-called foreign blacks from Cuba, some of the other Latin American
Dominican
countries.
Republic.
That's right. That's right. That's what it could be. The other blacks love their enemies so much until they said, we're going to integrate, and they just lost their baseball teams. They had leagues of baseball greats, great leaders, great players. And the white folks say, these Negroes, they called you all Negroes then, they're just too good. We're going to have to break that up. They are dominating. Say they little boys not even professional. They play us during the summer, and we're professional. They beat the devil out of us. We make 4 points, 4 runs, and they make 15. And they can play 18 hours a day and beat us. And ride all night in a van, 30 and 40 of them in a van, a little caravan, and still get out and beat us. So we got to cut that out.
And you changed their policy. I remember when they raised the goal in basketball. I remember when they outlawed dunking because they did not want Africans to dominate.
And they continue to do it educationally, politically, socially. That's why they came up with integration. Say these Negroes too strong. Say these Negroes here in America, I'm talking about the 1960s, early, late 50s. Say these Negroes got a lot of business sense. They have their own hotels. They have their own golf courses. They have their resort centers. They have their own banks, theaters, movies, their own communities. We got to mess this up.
Doc, we got to go. We got to get out of here.
And that's when they got people like Martin Luther King Jr. and some of the others. You talked about why his picture was on the wall. That's another story.
This is a story that I need to understand.
That's right. He, Jesus, and John Kennedy were all in the same camp.
Now, Doc, we're going to have to spend some time with that. I got to come back. I don't have time to deal with it. But if they were in the same camp, I got to understand what were they talking about.
Well, I'll prove it to you when we talk. Let's do it next week.
Let's do it next week.
I'll prove it to you.
Okay.
They're all there.
Doc, we didn't get to the local elections that are taking place on Tuesday next week.
We'll talk about that on Friday.
It's so important that you get out and vote all across this country, especially in Jackson, Mississippi, where as a team we have been losing so long that we are worse than the bad news bears. We're worse than the bad news bears. We've been losing so long. We gotta change some coaches. We gotta change some players. We gotta get new blood, new ideas, new concepts. Go vote this election. Vote for change. Vote for individuals that you believe that are unapologetically black, that will serve the black community intentionally. Vote for those individuals. Do not vote for someone whom you believe has been compromised, someone that you believe that is the victim of the invasions we've been talking about, someone who doesn't love you as black people. Do not support those people. Dr. Henderson, you are one of the most renowned, sought-after speakers in the whole country. Tell us a little bit about how folk can get in touch with you.
Well, it is very simple. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to hear the real news, I have a show called The Real News, and that's the show for radio and television. But if you want to hear the real news, things that I can't say on radio and TV they're so factual until tears will come to your eyes, you call me at 601-201-1957. Let us know what you want us to talk about. and we will give you solutions and problems and show you that you can change your life and status. Or you can email us at clu369@gmail.com, and we'll come and talk to you folks and tell you how you can start changing things. Not next year, in 30, 60, or 90 days.
That's it for tonight. We Believe Digital brings you the kinds of programs that you won't find anywhere else in the world. Share this program with all of your producers and your TV stations and your radio hosts. We'd love for them to pick this program up on a syndicated basis. Until next week, we want you to stay safe and good evening.
Socrates, you will make me